The No Nonsense Roundtable. It's a weekly show broadcast on Rochester, New York's 50,000-watt iHeart radio station, News Radio Wham 1180. The host, Dom Geneva, interviews guests from all walks of life, all with amazing stories to tell. What you are about to hear is a recording of a previous broadcast without the breaks and commercials. Now, here's host Dom Geneva.
Well, welcome everybody to another edition of the No Nonsense Roundtable every Saturday right here on News Radio Wham 1180. And like I like to explain to everybody, the past shows are on nononsenseroundtable.com. So one of the things about me, and I think the gang out there listening to me all knows about this, is that I am not a native Rochesterian. I came here in 1994, which is really a good thing and kind of a bad thing. It's a good thing because I've lived other places and I realize how nice this place is. But the other thing is there's things of the things that are woven into the culture of Rochester and Rochester people that I'm not aware of. And Take for instance, the ice storm. Everybody here knows about the ice storm except for me because I got here after the ice storm. But the other thing is about the culture of Rochester years ago. And Kodak and, well, a little bit of a history with the mob. And I have somebody on my telephone right now from Los Angeles. And her name is Georgia Durante. And she's an author, a stunt driver, a person that was involved in all of this back then. She just wrote a book, The Company She Keeps. And Georgia, welcome to the show.
Hi. Yeah, and I didn't just write this book. I wrote it 25 years ago.
Well, and that shows you how I told you I was oblivious, didn't I? I did not lie. You know, I used to be a car dealer. I didn't lie all the time. I mean, just sometimes. So,
yeah. And when I did the book signing last week in Rochester, it was 25 years later, and I couldn't believe the crowd that showed up. I mean, I was amazed. I got to see a lot of people I hadn't seen in years, but I didn't get a chance to talk to anybody for more than two minutes, if that long.
Well, it was at Red. I will attest to this because it was at Red Fratelli's. A wonderful place. And I guess it was supposed to start at 6:00. So I got there at 6:15, right? And the room was filled with like I don't know, it was like 600 people. I don't know how they got that many people into the room. And I'm like, whoever's there, I mean, they got to be turning like Red's got to be serving you water, and it's got to be turned into wine or something. Like, why these an enormous amount of people came to see you. It was just, it was incredible. I couldn't even get in the door.
I know. In fact, they ended up locking the doors. There was maybe 60, 70 people trying to get in, and it was just over capacity. Red was freaking out because of the fire, rules and stuff, Oh my God, it was like unbelievable. I ran out of books and God, and I had to take all these orders, and I've been home now for 2 days, and that's all I've been doing is packaging up books, signing them and getting them out. I haven't had a chance to even unpack.
Well, you look online and I've done a little bit of research, and you've been interviewed by Bill Maher and Larry King and people. Just extraordinary presence that you have. But even so, I couldn't believe there was that many people here. What do you attribute this to? I mean, just a local thing, or people know you more here than any place else? I mean, is this typical for you? Like you go to Chicago and get like 500 people signing up for books?
Well, when I did the very first book signing, which was at Barnes and Nobles in Pittsford, there were 600 people there, and they were like 4 abreast all the way down the stairs, out the door, and around the building. I couldn't believe that. And then I finished that book signing and then went to Greece, and there was just as many people waiting there. It was, I don't know. I mean, it could be, just the interest in the mob and what happened back in the 70s. And, and there's so many people that have lived it. But then there's this younger generation coming up that, hear about these stories, but, they weren't there. So they want to know, And Gina Gingello was also there, and she wrote a book about her dad,
Mm-hmm.
Sammy G. And people are just interested. She did very well that night too,
Yeah, I'm
and
just
all the other mob books that were out, which was great.
well. Your story is, from what I understand, a story of survival, a way of bonding with younger women and whatever. One of the things about the show is that I usually call somebody and ask them a little bit about the guest, somebody that might know them and whatever. And I have a little write up here from Jack Alaco, and I won't read this right now because it has a lot of stuff to do with what you're doing down and being in Los Angeles. And he ends it with, "She is a warm and lovely person." Are you a warm and lovely person?
As long as you don't get on the bad side of me.
Yeah. Now,
There's Georgia White and there's Georgia Black. I haven't seen Georgia Black come out in a long time, but I know she's still there.
Now, is that something you learned from driving for the mob, or were you like that before you were driving for the mob?
Well, okay, this is interesting because I never planned on writing a book. And I was doing this Bugle Boy Jeans commercial. And I had to do a 180 on a very narrow road in Bodega Bay. Well, it was a vintage Dino Ferrari, so it had no power steering. And the back tire caught the soft shoulder and flipped me over the embankment. And I was somersaulting towards a 300-foot drop off into the ocean. And all I thought about was, oh my God, I'm wrecking a $250,000 car. My life did not pass in front of me. I didn't think about my kids. Nothing, everything that they say happens when you're facing death didn't happen. So when I got back from location, I went to see a therapist. And the therapist suggested that I write 20 minutes a day, whatever came into my head. So I started doing that, and all this stuff started coming out that I had suppressed for so long. And then I started adding dialogue, and I realized there was this other person speaking. So I named that person Georgia Black. And Georgia White was like the sweet, innocent side of me. And Georgia Black was the person that, was always there to help me in bad situations. And then I said, geez, this looks like it's turning into a book. But I didn't think I could write. So I called Sydney Sheldon, who was a good friend of mine.
Wow.
I said, Sydney, I think I'm writing a book here. I said, but I don't know how to write. And I said, can you suggest a ghostwriter? He said, send me what you got. So I sent him this 40 pages of this very raw journal. He gets it, calls me back 3 days later, and he says, Georgia, you don't need a ghostwriter. He said, you know how to tell a story, and you got a story to tell. He said, but what I do, he said, start out when you were a child. Get the reader to know you and love you. So when they get to these parts, they'll forgive you.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I have that begs the question I ask everybody, and we're going to ask you that question right after this break. Well, welcome back. We're talking to Georgia Durante, who is, how would you describe yourself? I mean, that's a good question. I did that with Carl Palmer last week or the week before. How do you describe yourself? Who is Georgia Durante?
Well, I finally know who I am, and it took a long time. It took a long time. When I was 17, I was raped by my brother-in-law. Ooh. And I lost all my self-esteem. And I, when that happens to people, they start hanging around with people that they think are their equal. And those are the people that end up in jail or do bad things like drive the getaway cars, you know. And it really wasn't until I wrote the book and I would reread what I'd written and say, wow, that's why I did that, or that's why I do this. And I discovered who I was, you know.
Mm-hmm.
To get that self-esteem, you don't look at yourself as being anything great, you know. But when people are patting you on the back, it just builds up your self-esteem. And when I work with women and, abused women shelters and stuff, that's what I work on. I work on trying to build up their self-esteem. I had one girl that she worked at a radio station, and my book was laying around there. And she brought the book home, and she sent me an email, and she said, I was going to kill myself this weekend. She said, after reading your book and seeing what you faced and how you came out of this, if you can do it, I can do it. And she didn't kill herself, but she signed her name with a small n. It was Nicole. So I wrote her back and I said, first thing you got to do is capitalize your name. Then you're going to get some self-esteem, So anyway, I didn't know writing this book, it's not all about the mob. It's about my whole life and how I progressed and how I became the person I am today. And women who are reading the book that are in abusive situations are seeing themselves on the pages. And they're seeing, because when you're in that situation, you don't realize you're in that situation. But by reading what happened to me, they're seeing, hey, that's happening to me too. And it's giving them courage to get out of their situations. When I get emails from women and, asking for advice, I'm not a psychiatrist. I can only write about how I did it, but it may not be right for them. So I'm very reluctant in saying, well, this is what you got to do, but they're getting it. They're reading about themselves, and they're getting the push that they need to get out of their situation.
So the book was cathartic. You pronounced the name. It was a catharsis. It was a catharsis for you. Is that what it is? That it?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's basically, what I was doing. I didn't think I was ever really going to sell a book, even though people told me all my life, you should write a book. And I'm thinking, why? But they were seeing something I didn't, and in fact, when the book came out, it was really interesting. I ended up have you ever heard of the National Press Club in Washington, D.C.?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I got a call from them. They, out of like 1,000 books that are out that year, they choose 40 authors. And I was one of the chosen authors, which kind of blew me away. And they flew me into Washington, and I'm seated next to Larry King on my right and Bill O'Reilly on my left. Right? And they said, well, what's your book about? And I started to tell them, and they both said, we got to have you on the show.
Yeah.
And that's how that happened. And then we did after that came out, then they did a 4-page article in People magazine. I mean, I got a lot of publicity right out of the gate.
Oh, sure. So this is one of those fascinating stories. I have this expression, and people hear me say it all the time. When a boat leaving port in New York, if it has a very small change in a bearing, has an incredible difference at the end when you get to Europe, okay? So this, you didn't write this to inspire other women, but you found that it has inspired other women and given them a story that they can relate to.
Oh, yeah, and I didn't know that was going to happen.
Right.
And after the book came out, and I started getting a flood of emails every day from all these women who were abused, and it just put me on another path, and I started speaking in prisons and, abused women's shelters and, really focusing on that because so many people needed that help. And it's very gratifying, very gratifying.
Well, it's one of those things where maybe, do you believe that God sent you in a direction, or is this just happenstance? Yes. Really? Okay.
Absolutely. That's what I said. I just felt like God was guiding my pen. It was just coming out,
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, my personal feeling is that things are happening to you. You don't know where they're going to end up, but, you don't pray for something in particular, but you pray, hey, I hope things work out well. And my life is like that because I've had a lot of twists and turns and stuff like that. It's turned out okay. Now, the thing that I think younger people have to realize is that when you're talking about that era back then, I mean, women's rights were just coming into being. I mean, I remember that there were ads in the paper for help wanted male and help wanted female. There were only so many things that you could do as a female or be accepted as a female.
And that was the thing, because back then, which people don't realize today, it's a lot different today. But if you went to the police, well, that's the last thing you do when you're in an abusive situation. It's like a death sentence. But if you did, they would always side with the guy,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I had an instance. Oh, I I got so many things I'm thinking about. In Las Vegas. Now, my ex-husband put a loaded gun to my head, one with only one bullet in it, and he pulled the trigger twice because I wanted to leave. Another time, he held me down out of a 2-story building by my ankles.
Oof.
I always tried to get away from him, and I did get away. I went to Las Vegas, and I got a job in as a camera girl in one of the showrooms at the Sahara Hotel. So I didn't know it, but one of his buddies happened to be in there, and he saw me, and he knew my husband was looking for me, and he called him. And one night, I'm leaving work, and I'm going out to the employee's parking lot, and he's standing by my car, and he says, "Get in." Right. And it was a little Volkswagen, a little orange Volkswagen. It was the best car I ever had. I love that little car. 1968 Volkswagen. And so he says, "Are you going to come back?" And I said, "No, I'm happy. Why don't you just let me be happy?" And he's, "Okay, I'm going to do something to you. I'm going to do time for it." And he starts driving out towards the desert. Now, Vegas back then was not like it's built up today. You'd be out of town in 10 minutes. There was one light before it was pure desert, and we're approaching that light. And he starts slowing down. And I said, "This is my chance to get out." And we're going about 20 miles an hour. And I opened the door and jumped out. Now he's backing up, trying to run over me. And by the time the light had changed again, now there's a car sitting at the light. And I run to the car, just opened up the door, and it was a woman. And I just said, "Please, just take me where there's people." And she did a U-turn. She says, "Does he have a gun?" I said, "No, I don't think so." And the whole time he's trying to run us off the road. And we get back on the strip, and we're in front of the Stardust Hotel, and there's 5 police cars parked there. And she says, "There's a cop. Do you want me to pull over?" Well, when she said that, I knew she had been in an abusive situation, because you never go to the cops, right?
Uh-huh.
So I jumped out of the car. I said, "Yes." And she lets me out, and I run up to the cop. Now I'm all bleeding and, disheveled from, being on the ground and jumping out of that car. So I run up to the cop and I said, "Officer," now he's parked now and he's walking towards us. And I said, "Look, that's my car. I just want my car and I want to go home." Not saying anything to the cop, right? But obviously something is definitely wrong here. So he comes up and he's dressed in a suit and his diamond cufflinks. He looks like he just stepped off GQ magazine, And he goes up to the cop, pulls him aside, and he says, "Officer, this is my wife." He said, "Her psychiatrist thought it would be a good idea if we came to Las Vegas, but obviously that's not working." And the cop looks at me and he says, "Lady, why don't you take your problems and go home?" And I looked at him and I said, "Home is not the direction I'm going." And I kicked him and I ripped off his name tag, and he arrested me, which is exactly what I wanted him to do. Because if I had to get back in that car, I would have been dead. So anyway, I ended up jumping bail, and he got stuck with a $5,000 bail bill. But that, that's how it was back then.
Right.
Take your problems and go home. Come on.
Well, we're about ready to head into a news break, but this brings up a word, two words that I think describe you, and we'll be talking about that right after this. Well, welcome back. We're talking to Georgia Durante. I guess to describe you, you've had some life, but one thing from that last story about purposely trying to get arrested so you can get away from your husband, there's two words that I absolutely hear in this whole thing. You are street smart.
Yeah, that I am. That's the one good thing that came out of the
Oh my God, you're so street smart. You smacked the cop because you knew he would arrest you because your husband would have killed you. That is so smart. They say these days, if somebody gets into your car and they're trying to hijack you and they're in your car, they say drive your car into a bridge abutment because the airbag will go off, and the car's not going to go anywhere and you can get out of the car. So, that's basically, you did that. you did that. In essence, you did that, oh God, that's good. That is just great. So we're talking about back in the 80s or 90s or, but before that, we're talking about back in the 70s.
70s.
So you were, so you were the spokesperson, if you would say, for Kodak, right? I mean, you were the first one let's talk, frankly, you were the first one, they say, that wore a bikini in the thing, the stand-up, thing where you.
How many? That was the life-size poster. It was in all the camera stores and shops all over the world, and it was the first time Kodak ever used a bikini, and they were so nervous about it that they actually airbrushed out my belly button.
I saw that. I couldn't. I'm looking online. I'm going, she doesn't have a belly button. She must have been one giant egg.
Yeah.
I don't think chickens have belly buttons. I don't think so. No, they don't. Yeah, I noticed that. Well, they did the same thing with Barbara Eden. She couldn't have her genie outfit and have her belly button show. That was so scandalous back then.
Yeah,
and right now you look at it, it's very modest looking for these days, so.
Exactly. That would go up to my waist.
Well, here's the thing though. Back then, you got to be a driver for these guys that needed stuff picked up and dropped off.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, how did that happen? I mean, like, that they don't, all of a sudden they don't say, hey, Georgia over there, she looks good. Yeah, she might be a driver. Go stick her in the car. I mean, what? I mean, how do they know you had this talent? Because you obviously had the talent. By the way, I have a 2015 Dodge Hellcat stick shift that next time you come here, you can drive for me. Okay.
Okay. Well, let's see. I moved to New York City. I was 17, not quite 18 yet. And my girlfriends and I ended up at Fridays. And we met these guys that were just like the guys I left in Rochester, right?
Oh, okay.
And they take us to this after-hour club. And we started hanging out there. And then I started dating the owner of this after-hours club. His name was Frankie. And anyway, me and my two roommates ended up bartending there for fun. It was just fun. And I just set this drink down in front of this guy, and he pulls out a gun and shoots the guy next to him.
Oh.
Everybody scattered. Frankie threw me the car keys. He says, Georgie girl, get the car, pull it up. So I pulled the car up. They got his body down 2 flights of stairs, threw him in the back seat. And I got him to Bellevue Hospital in record time. And all they thought, they just pulled his body out. We left him on the sidewalk in front of the emergency, beeped the horn, and took off. All they talked about was, man, Georgie girl, can you drive a car? Right? They could care less whether this guy lived or died, right? And so anyway, that's all they talked about for like a month or 2 months or whatever it was. And then I went back to Rochester and ran into Sammy G. And Sammy says, Georgie, you got to do a favor for me. And I said, Sure. What do you need, Sammy? He says, you need to deliver a message for me. He said, I'm going to drop off an envelope. See, tomorrow somebody will pick you up at the airport and, take you where you need to go. So anyway, I fly back. He gives me this sealed envelope, and this guy picks me up at the airport and drives me into Brooklyn. And I'm being escorted into this back room. There's 4 guys sitting there. And I'm introduced as Georgie Girl. And this one guy kind of raised his eyebrow like he recognized my name. And he says, I hear you're a pretty good driver. And I said, well, thank you, And so anyway, I give them the message and I'm being escorted out. And the guy says, the old man really liked you. And I looked at him and I said, which old man? They were all old.
Yeah.
It turned out to be Carlo Gambino.
Wow.
So they must have thought if I could be trusted with whatever was in that message, and I still don't know to this day, I was appearing on covers of magazines. I looked like the girl next door. I was the perfect person for them to use.
Yeah.
Perfect, And it started out innocently, picking up packages, delivering them to different places. And I had to deliver them to JFK Airport quite a few times. And these 2 guys would always be waiting with suits on. And I wondered, what that was all about, but never asked any questions. I found out later there were millions of dollars in these packages and boxes that I was picking up. And those guys were the CIA, and they were laundering the money for the mob in foreign countries.
Mm.
And people would always say, aren't you afraid to write about the mob? Well, first of all, I don't point fingers. I don't say who murdered so and so. I'll give you the backstory, but I don't say who did this, And I said, no, I'm really not afraid of the mob. Most of them are dead now anyway.
That's right. They're legit now, right? I mean, the thing from The Godfather is right? They're legit now, right?
They're never legit. They try to be.
So we have about a minute left in this segment. The elephant in the room is the one kind of silly question. How close is The Godfather to the way things really are?
Well, what I discovered when that movie came out was the guys patterned themselves after the movie. Yeah, no, I knew. Did you see the what is it? The Office? I think it was called The Office.
No.
It's on Paramount.
Mm.
It's about the making of The Godfather, which is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible. I think there's 10 parts to it.
Is there any one of them that's accurate? Goodfellas, Casino, and any of these movies you look at and you go, yeah, that's pretty close.
Well, Goodfellas was pretty damn close. In fact, Henry Hill was a friend of mine.
Ah.
And when we come back after you have to do your little segment here, I'll tell you that story.
and we're going to do my little segment. And we'll be right back after this little segment. Well, we're back. We are talking here on the No Nonsense Roundtable to Georgia Durante, and my little segment is over. Well, where were we going with that? I mean, you just kind of blew my mind on this. What's going on?
Henry,
Oh yeah, Henry Hill.
I met him in New York years ago, but when he was in the witness protection program, he was writing a cookbook called Cooking on the Run. And he would come over on Thursdays and he would cook something. And if I liked it, he'd put that recipe in the cookbook. But my book had just come out and he says, I got to do the Howard Stern show tomorrow. You want to do it with me? And I said, well, Henry, I don't know why you're putting yourself out there like that. I said, somebody's going to kill you. Nah, nobody's going to kill me. And so I said, well, I'll sell some books. Okay. So At the time, I was dating the chief of the strike force for organized crime,
Mm.
and he was here having dinner with us, and so I said I made a bed for Henry on the couch because the show was like 3 o'clock in the morning or something. So when I got up, I made coffee, went in the bathroom. I gave it to Henry, went in the bathroom and brushed my teeth. What I didn't know is he poured the coffee out and he filled the cup with straight liquor.
Mm.
So the phone rings. It's the Stern Show. Henry picks up the phone in the kitchen. I go in my office and Jim goes in my bedroom listening to it live. So Howard, you know how Howard is. He said, "So what's going on there, Henry?" And Henry says, "Oh, I'm over here with the prosecutor." And he says, "A prosecutor? What are you doing with the prosecutor?" And he said, "Well, it's not really the prosecutor's house. It's Georgia Durante's house." I said, "Oh my God." My
Mm.
my boyfriend kept running out of the bedroom. And he hangs the phone up on him. He says, "Come on, Henry, I got to get you out of here." I said, "Great. What am I going to do?" He said, "Go up to the secret room until I call you." I ended up in the secret room for 3 days. But anyway.
It's amazing how you stripped your gears here. You went from being involved with the mob to dating the strike group organizer for organized crime.
Yes, he was, which was really great when my book came out because the FBI was like questioning me, and he knew them all, and he kept them all away from me. They all wanted answers, which I wasn't going to give.
Yeah.
But anyway. Yeah, our first date, our first date, we went to see Donnie Brasco, and when the credits are rolling after the movie, we're both like looking straight ahead, and of course he was involved in that, being in the strike force, and I was involved on the other side, and finally the credit ends and there's nobody left in the theater, and I just look at him. I said, "Jim, I don't think this is going to work."
Oh, so here, yeah, I got some background on you from people that know you. Maybe a little inside information here. I talked to Jack Alaka. You know Jack.
Yes, I know Jack.
Another wonderful human being. 11 Emmys, and he actually talks to me. He's great. Matter of fact, I made him dinner at my house one day.
Really?
Yes. I'm a fairly adept cook. My mother taught me how to cook, so I made him a little chicken piccata. That's what I did. But okay, so Jack, I asked Jack. I says, what to ask you, and he kind of goes into your life in L.A. Actually, I see that on YouTube. I saw you and Buddy Hackett together, and you were saying he was like your favorite person of all time, and that was kind of cool. I mean, so it begs the question: how many people you know, and how many paths you cross. But here's what he said: she has a beautiful home in Los Angeles. She calls the Enchanted Manor. Probably you haven't been asked that before. She often allows couples to be married on the ground. She has a long-time friendship with Hugh O'Brien, he goes Wyatt Earp, if you didn't know, and dated Chuck Woolery, Wheel of Fortune's original host. She has an incredible Christmas party at her home every year with tons of celebrity. She is held in high regard by the celebrity community out there. So you seem to be loved.
That's sweet. Yeah, my Christmas parties. Oh my God, I have celebrities. I have priests and nuns, CIA and FBI. It's like central casting.
It's Halloween is coming up very soon. That sounds like more like Halloween than Christmas.
Yeah, on the invitation I say leave your guns at the door. And check under your car before leaving, and don't talk to FBI agents.
Okay, now here's the thing. I think I sent you my little video, that 3-minute thing on Ringo Starr. It's got like 50,000 views online. Tell me an incredible story about somebody with something. Somebody somebody everybody knows.
Okay. All right. Well, I had a cat. It was a black cat with white paws, and Sherry Hackett, that's Buddy's wife, called and said, "What are you going to do with white walls when you go on location?" I said, "I don't know, Sherry. I really shouldn't have a cat." She said, "Well, Buddy and I would love to have him if you're thinking of giving him away. I said, consider it yours. And she said, okay. Well, I had to leave for location in 2 weeks. So she said, you probably want to keep it until you leave. So they picked it up 2 days before I had to leave. And the next day, Sherry calls me and says, Georgia, she says, White Walls is missing. Oh, the whole 2 weeks that they were waiting for the cat, in Buddy's head, he kept thinking the cat's name was Hubcaps. So,
Okay.
he kept saying, when is Hubcaps coming? When is Hubcaps coming? Well, they got the cat. Sherry calls me and says, Georgia, White Walls is missing. I said, Sherry, did you feed it? And she said, of course I fed it. And I said, well, don't worry, he'll be back. And she calls me an hour later. She says, White Wall still isn't back. She says, Buddy's in his study. He's crying his eyes out. He fell in love with that cat. He slept with it all night. I said, tell Buddy not to worry. The cat will be back. So an hour later, she calls me again. She said, are you sitting down? I said, yeah. She said, well, we just had a knock on the door, and Buddy answered the door. He's in his robe. His eyes are all red from crying all morning. And there's 2 cops standing there. And they said, Mr. Hackett, we're so sorry. We've been up and down this street all morning, and we can't find your hubcaps anywhere.
Oh, God almighty. So, Georgia, people like to know about people who see people, know people, rub elbows to people. Tell me about some of the people that we know that you've known that would maybe be familiar to everybody.
You know what? I know. I know all the old stars. In fact, geez, I mean, just people will say, who should play you, and they'll tell me, and I have to look them up because I don't know who any of these people are anymore. But like Maureen O'Hara and. Well, not so old, but Kenny G and Peter Lawford and, Ricardo Montalban, and just, you know what? Just go on my website, the companySheKeeps.com. Yeah. There's a gallery there, and you can see all of the stars that I know and.
Well, the other thing is we can see you driving cars in commercials and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, you could do that.
Well, no, you said Ricardo Montalban. I worked for Chrysler for 17 years, and talk about stand-up cutouts. We had to actually sell those cutouts to our dealers when I was working at Chrysler. Yeah.
So your dealers, now I did a lot of the dealer footage for Chevrolet every year.
Yeah.
I worked with Bobby Unser Jr., and we would go, we were on the road for like 2.5 months. In like 13 different states, and every car that Chevy made, we had like 6 car carriers that followed us everywhere.
Oh yeah.
And we did all the running footage.
Yeah. I told you I have a Hellcat, but I'm totally unqualified to drive this thing. It's 730 horsepower stick shift, and it's just one of these things. So I have to tell you, the time has gone very, very quickly. It's been a delight talking to you. You are a fascinating person, and the story that you wrote this book that wasn't really intended in its inception to help women, but yet it became that is a really compelling thing. That's something that I didn't know, and it's great to have you on the show. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I really had fun with you.
Yeah. In my very unprofessional way, I do this for a hobby, not a living. So, it's very good to lower people's expectations, Georgia, because then they're never disappointed. So, hey, gang, next week it's a No Nonsense Roundtable, 10 o'clock on Saturdays, right here on News Radio Wham 1180.
Thanks for listening. Tune in every weekend from 10 to 11 on News Radio Wham 1180. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll make more.